Welcome in this new podcast episode. Today I am talking to Silvia Scozia, and she is the founder, I should say, of the company which is called BST Impact. And of course, you can hear that is close to what I'm doing because mine is deciding to impact, right? So it's also impact. Welcome, Silvia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we've met at the event organized by a couple of people in the Netherlands about boosting the SDGs. That's where I didn't really get to know you, but that's where we first met. And I thought, okay, this would be interesting. We had a pre-conversation for this podcast. And I thought, okay, what you're doing is still very interesting to learn more about. Because you are working a lot with the SDGs and making impact. But before we go there, because if I look at your work experience, you have been really in different organizations that have like a social impact missions.
Yes, absolutely. I think the fact that my past experience has been in the public sector mainly, has really obviously driven my focus on social impact right now. Before, in these organizations, we don't call it social impact, but it is about human rights. I've been mainly working with human rights and humanitarian law. So in my experience with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement and the IOM, so the International Organization for Migration, the United Nations Tribunal for the ex-Yugoslavia, I was mainly analyzing legislative development and doing assessments and research and comparative also analysis on international protection and everything, international protection of human rights standards. That's what I mean. And it's mainly really focused around the implementation of what international law says in national systems. So what I have been studying for, first of all, and then I've been having work experience in, is really what does the law says, what is the normative framework around the protection of human rights, and what does the law, the jurisprudence, so both soft law and hard law instruments say to grant the enjoyment of human rights. I've been specializing in humanitarian law as well, which is the law that applies in armed conflict, and that was my main focus with the Red Cross. So really looking at the protection of civilians and other guarantees that humanitarian law provides, and how in the national framework these were received by states and how they were implemented. So it is slightly different from what we are doing with BST Impact in the private sector, but it really stems from the same point, which is there are obligations that have been thought for states and have been included in the framework that is international human rights law, international humanitarian law. But they are, the ultimate aim is to provide protection to individuals, and corporations have been increasingly having a enormous influence on the enjoyment of rights of individuals and communities. And this is why with my business partner, Giulia Biselli, who has a very similar background, we have decided to really transpose this expertise on human rights, but also really the focus on looking at everything, all the operations, the activities that an organization or a business has with a lens of human rights. So a rights-based approach, we call it. And this has been the basis for the establishment of BST that draws from our experience in the public sector.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can unpack this a little more so I can understand it as well. So, okay, let's go to your studies, because I think that's a linking pin that's going to help me to make it understand. First of all, I've noticed that you've been graduating summa cum laude, so I think you are really a study head, is that correct?
I like it.
Yeah, that's what I guessed. But you studied law
Mhm.
and international law and humanitarian law in Spain, in Sevilla.
I studied in Italy, so bachelor degree and master's degree in law in Italy. I
Right.
did have a 1 year where I studied in Spain.
Ah.
And then the specialization in human rights and humanitarian law was in Geneva at the Geneva Academy. That
And
was really a turning point because it's a great program that really provides you with solid knowledge of these topics.
right, we're gonna go in that direction. But you also went to The Hague.
Yes, The Hague has been an experience with the ICTY, that is the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. So
Right.
there I was with the Office of the Prosecutor.
And then you went to Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires was a diploma in refugee protection, so migration refugee protection. That was with the University of Buenos Aires.
What is it that in high school made you think that you wanted to go study law?
Great question. In high school, I think I was really drawn by the international dimension of law. So I knew that I wanted to study international law before I wanted to study law. So I was drawn by the influence, and if you want, you can say impact that a professional can have with his business or her business activity. So in finding a way on how I could combine this aim with solid means, for me, the law has always been something that in a way assists with the frustration of having to feeling powerless sometimes in front of abuses. And we can talk about abuses of human rights. I don't have to convince you that you shouldn't harm the right of this person because there's the law that says so. So for me, really acquiring the tools to be able to defend human rights with this knowledge made me feel empowered. And that's why I was drawn by this dimension of law before deciding really and defining what my role would be. But the most vulnerable communities, even in high school, I could see that there were communities that were suffering, that were affected by conflict situations, and those really stand out as the most vulnerable. So humanitarian law.
What images do you remember that you saw at that time that you felt that those communities needed support in that area?
I don't feel particularly comfortable talking about specific images, because I think that sometimes, especially in the NGO, marketing sort of dimension, there is really a need to stress with images the need for assistance for vulnerable communities or situations of vulnerability. And I understand why, and I know that sometimes it's really a technique to wake conscience, and it's a means to an end. But I don't think there was a particular image. I don't think there was a particular image that stayed with me. I think it was really, I want to contribute to the protection of human rights, and if I have to look at where there's the most need for this service, obviously looking at conflict affected communities is something that comes to mind, because it's really situations where basic guarantees of even your right to life, right, is really threatened by armed violence, and everything else, all the other connected human rights are not. There are increasing obstacles to their enjoyment, and so for me, humanitarian law was the answer to that, because it really looks at the protection of civilians, and I found myself really passionate in learning what were the means and the guidelines and really how humanitarian law tries to look at the obligations of states in the context of chaos and fragility, and try to make them feasible with a situation as tragic as is armed conflict.
I can imagine that when you are a company and I can see examples as well, when you have a company you want to make impact. For example, A Beautiful Story is a company that makes jewelry that sells jewelry that is made in Nepal. Mm-hmm. So by selling the jewelry, they help people in Nepal to create a job, to have an income. So the initial idea of impact for them was, for her, the business owner, was very easy. She needs to just sell the jewelry so that she can help more people there on a job and working on these jewelry to create them. So I can imagine that if you do that, the first thing that you think about is just getting work so that you can get these people to work and so that they can make a living. I just talked with, in the previous episode, with Willem Gauss. He's from South Africa. And he helps young people to build a business in a short time, 21 days. And I think the same feeling is there, that people are now don't have a job, they don't make money, they have no money. So the first thing that you concentrate on is to make sure that they have a business or something that they can make money so that they can build a living. And you don't think about all the rules and regulations that you are talking about. Like, for example, if you look at the SRGs, right? So the first one is no poverty, the second one is no hunger, and the third one is good health, and the fourth one is quality education. So if you look at the SRGs, what do you feel is the SRG that your company has the most relation with?
So I think I absolutely agree with what you say, and the fact that it can be overwhelming to have to look at everything and have to try to align with all the requirements at first, when you're really just trying to create job and fight unemployment. I think that that's obviously the first step, and it is definitely something that is valuable to look at. Every economic activity inherently has, obviously with all the caveat of the question, can have an inherent positive social impact, because it can generate work and employment. And this is something that it's also looked at in the regulations, the upcoming regulations. Now there is the final report on the social taxonomy, and it recognizes this value as an inherent value of an economic activity. But it is not enough, because the SDGs do not have to be looked at separated silos. So I understand that it is sometimes not feasible or not perceived as really overwhelming to have to look at everything and all the SDGs together, but they are deeply interconnected. So it is inevitable that if you're having an impact on one SDG, there is surely something that will have a connected impact on another, because they are strictly connected with human rights. And as are human rights, the goals are not only interdependent, but are also indivisible. So there are things that if you have an impact on the right to water, you will inevitably have impact on the right to food, because water is connected with agriculture. You have an impact on the right to health and on the decent standard of living. And all these factors can be seen just by digging a bit deeper into your initiative. So providing work is definitely the starting point, but you can look at providing decent work. And if you're looking at decent work standards, and you're also looking at wages, you're also looking at social security guarantees, you're also looking at a series of other factors that then allow you to say that you are contributing not only to that goal, but your activities having implications and spillover effects on a variety of other human rights, and therefore achieving more than the main priority SDG. I remember that you asked me once if I thought it was we were going to reach the SDGs by 2030, and I think that we definitely need to be more ambitious with the targets that we set as businesses. But that one of the main reasons why we are now behind this is because there are very few companies that really look at their impact on all the SDGs. There is really just the focus on a few, and therefore the ones that are more difficult to address, like poverty eradication, for example, are really just left behind. And so this is, apart from being contrary to what the agenda says about leaving no one behind, it really creates a discrepancy. So it is important also to look at how the business activity can have an impact on those goals that are not primarily connected with the main activity, but are surely part of the big picture, be it through the main business activity or through the business relationships, and therefore extending this to the value chain of the business.
Yeah, and that question that I had that came from my idea when I was in this event by boosting the SRGs. What I before didn't really realize, it hadn't sunk in, was that the year 2030, right? So that the SDGs were connected to the year 2030. Mm-hmm. And I've also read another book called Drawdown, which talks about solution to improve our CO2 reduction. And they talk about 2050. And you can hear a lot of politicians talking about 2050, right? So I feel like not a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, are aware of the urgency of 2030 for the SDGs. I mean, it's important for the planet, but it's also important for the people, right? So I always look at the social inequality and the ecological inequality. And for me, there's a big difference between how we live in the Western world and how the people in the Southern Hemisphere live, right? So the people we in the West exploit the resources which are in the ground, but also the people in the South, mainly to increase the number of goods we can consume, right? So we just buy more stuff, as I call it, at the cost of those people. And those people is not a very good sounding words what I was looking for, but right, the people that we look at when we look at the SDGs. How can we, you and I, increase the awareness and also the feeling of urgency on the SDGs? How can we create a better world for a lot of people in such a short time?
Your questions are very ambitious.
I'm sorry.
I like it. I like it. I think that this job, both yours and mine, really come with a strong dimension of advocacy. So it's not only working with businesses who already know that they need to make a change in their decision making and really commit to certain standards, but it's also this conversation. It's also knowledge sharing initiatives. It's also just really having the discussion around why human rights are important and why it really concerns everybody, both individuals, companies. It's really a multi-level and multilateral effort. That's the only way that the agenda can be pushed farther. And it has been widely recognized that governments alone cannot do not have the capacity to reach the goals. Individuals alone can obviously do their part, but it will not be enough if it's not coordinated. Therefore, it's really needed this shift of paradigm to align our priorities altogether. And what we can do is continuing to unpack the issues that the challenges that are there, but really just trying to bring these issues on the ground and not stop looking at them as something that does not concern us, that is either happening to somebody else, that is from a context far away, or that is something that will not affect me tomorrow, because it will. Protection of human rights in general is something that affects each and every one of us, because our societies have not woken up from one day to the other having the guarantees that we enjoy today and that we give for granted. There has been a process both from human rights activists and legislators that has created the international legal system and the rule of law that we enjoy. And this system needs to be defended not only in our territories, but really it's really in the interests of society as a whole to see human rights as concrete everyday issues and to continue fighting and advocating for the upholding of international standards, be it from governments, from individuals, or from businesses, because we are all really involved in this with our everyday decisions and everyday actions. Before it was only the states. Now it's increasingly clear that individuals play a major role, corporations play a major role in this.
Okay. You've mentioned human rights a couple of times when you just spoke. A very basic question. Why are human rights important?
So this is something that we have had to think about, because we have given this for granted for a long time. I have the people who have been studying and have been mainly working in the public sector with the agencies and organizations that work with the human rights standards. I have a conversation with somebody who is particularly interested in this topic, as I was mentioning that it has been a sort of a shock when I changed the perspective from the organizations I was working before to the private sector in general, where I had to find myself questioning the really basic notion of why should I care? That was something that was given for granted. So, you study human rights, you study what the law says, you study what the practice is, what the policy development is, what are the challenges. You never go back because it stems from your personal interest and from your own personal values. So you rarely have to go back and stop and say, why? Why is it important? So starting this business, we had to develop a sort of a narrative of why it's important for businesses and obviously for individuals. And it really comes to the actions in your everyday life that you give for granted. The food that you eat is a right to food. The roof that you have, it's a right to shelter. The school where your kids go is a right to education. And these have been achievements, and they have not been gifts. And there have been processes where there has been created an international consensus around what is now agreed as your right and something that you are entitled to. And for businesses, it comes back to the shift of paradigm where shareholder interests were really the main priority, and now the idea of having to build a reputational value around your company and your operations of the financial risks are really not taken into account. Also, these factors with the legal implications and the legal risks that arise, and really just the importance of having your social license to operate and being accepted in the community where you develop your operations. These are all being part of our efforts to try and explain why is important, both from a business case and from a moral point of view.
Yeah, I think you're right. The idea, of course, is once you live in a certain culture and area, and you do that for a longer time, you don't realize what the norm is, what the standard is on rights that you actually have, that people have fighted for in the past, right? So, and it becomes, of course, more clear when you compare yourself to other cultures where these things are not the norm, right? Like I said, I was talking to Willem Gaus, and when we here in the West talk about we help entrepreneurs creating a plan for a business, it's in the end you have a plan, right? You have a plan that you can then start implementing or start making action on. And there he's just in 21 days is just helping them to create a business, because the first thing that they need to do is to get food on the table. Mm-hmm. Because that's their main concern, is that they don't have food at the moment. And that's a whole different concern as a person that you have. It's a whole different urgency that you have with the feeling how you, and that's what I said. It becomes so accepted that the rights that what you just spoke about is the norm, that you don't think about it anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now because I looked at your LinkedIn profile and it and also your website, it talks about female founders, right? Mm-hmm. It's woman-owned, I should say, right? That was the term. Woman-owned business operating. Apparently, that's important to you, that because you have it on your website, there's a logo. Mm. How do you feel that? No. What do you think that we need to improve as a society in the Western world? I'm not talking about I'm talking about the Western world, to make it clear, for women rights, for female rights.
So I think that progress has been made, but the fact, for example, I can talk about the Italian context. It's increasingly present in public debate. So gender issues are part of the public debate, and this was not exactly the picture a few years ago. So it is becoming increasingly clear that there is work to do for equal rights, both in the workspace, so in business, as well as really in the private sphere. So we have a massive issue with domestic violence and feminicide in Italy, and there is obviously a part that needs to be done from the legislative development point of view, but it really starts from a cultural change. And the culture of relationship and mutual respect, and the ways that women are portrayed in television and on social media in general, obviously contributes to the culture. In terms of business, is the same. We at BST, we work with a firm that is specialized in cultural change from gender perspective, and it sometimes really looks at how it's important not only to tick the box and having your quota and having increasing the female workforce to say that you have a diverse and equal and you offer equal opportunity and equal representation, because it's really, you really need to look at empowerment. You really need to look at, has this quota opened the door for women to have a voice, or is it really just having them sitting on the board and not being able to make any decision? And at the same time, looking at the root causes of the challenge that you have, for example, in hiring enough women in mid and senior level positions. Why is it that you keep on hiring the same profile that happens to be the white male that has had the position for the last 10 years or 20 years? And so these exercises that go a step farther and they look at job criteria, for example. Are you opening up your job criteria to make them accept other dimension of the skill, of the competence that open the door for a diverse talent pool, or are you really just doing things as you've been doing the last 10 years? And talking about decision making for impact, I think these are the factors that need to be looked at. Not only the numbers, but empowerment, voice, opportunities for growth, and opportunities for development from a personal and professional perspective. And those are things that can be looked at by, for example, looking at the retention rate also of women. How long do they stay? Are they satisfied? Do they leave? Do they reach a senior position or a leadership position in how many years? What is the protection after incorporation that you give to foster a meaningful incorporation after pregnancy, for example? Because if you look at the gender pay gap, the main issue, it's not the inequality of payment as a start. It's not the starting line. It's really the divergence between women who come back after maternity leave and men who continue to grow. And so after a few years, this division has increased because there hasn't been a meaningful reincorporation. There hasn't been support for women who had to take up and really take on new responsibilities whilst having to take care of dependent newborn baby. And these are obviously, there's concrete measures that businesses can implement. But it, as I was saying, it comes back to a cultural shift, and that interests both businesses and society as a whole.
I had a discussion in the podcast, which is in Dutch, so I will put it in the show notes, but it's not for everybody. With Sophie van Gol, she wrote a book about this gender pay gap in the Netherlands specifically. So it's an interesting, and like you explained, that's where a large part of the inequality comes from. But also the interesting example she's giving from in the book is from Iceland, where women went on a strike, I think, for like a week, and most of the inequality was taken care of after that week because the whole state stopped working because of the importance of women in this situation. Why is this woman-owned badge so important to you?
Because it's a wonderfully supportive community that has really helped us grow as a business, and it's a community as Women Connect International, and supports female-owned businesses to really not only network and so really support each other on a personal level, perhaps discuss challenges that are specific for certain contexts, or really just as a female entrepreneur, and helps put service providers with the potential clients in contact. So it's something that on one hand reflects the increasing interest for corporations to look at female-owned businesses for their as their providers, and on the other hand really empowers and opens the door and gives the opportunity to businesses like us to grow.
Do you see that corporations see that as an advantage that you are women-owned?
I think so. I think on one hand there is a genuine commitment to promoting the cause of female empowerment and female entrepreneurship. On the other hand, it's certainly something that helps engaging that helps corporations push for their in their sustainability commitment. Really helps them in opening their mind with this, hearing new perspectives, and being able to also include the engagement with female-owned businesses as something that supports also their sustainability commitment. So I think it's both factors.
Okay, when I look at your website and I want to make clear what you do, you're an advisory firm, mm-hmm. and you train. What is it, just to make it very clear for people, right? What is it that I would hire you for?
You would hire us if you had, for example, a problem with your workforce. You don't have to get to that point, but let's imagine that you hire a woman in leadership position, and you have a massive strike then because there's 100 men under that woman that don't want to work for a woman, and you realize that you have a problem, that you don't want to accept the situation, and that you need to make sure that your workers uphold certain standards. So in order to avoid arriving to this situation, you can prevent issues of this type and of other human rights related risks by having social sustainability policies. So we develop policies on non-exploitation, non-discrimination, and really fair recruitment, contracts and employees relations, and grievance mechanisms, and the effective remedies. So how to have efficient mechanisms that grant an effective remedy. So we assist companies with developing their internal policies around social sustainability issues and having a strategy that is in line with this policy. So having corporate goals that fit within the standards and the goals that are enshrined in these policies. So it can be something, as I was saying, relating to your own employees. It can be something that you'd like to apply and to have your providers, your suppliers uphold. So you would like to make sure that all the providers and then the suppliers that you have in your supply chain are also upholding the standards of decent labor. So you want to make sure that there is no exploitation in the supply chain. And we would develop a policy for you, and we would also guide you through the monitoring and evaluation of compliance with this policy.
Policy to me sounds, and obviously not to you, but to me sounds like pieces of paper. Of course, they are now digital documents, but it sounds like documents. And in my experience, what usually happens to documents is that they are created and then they are shelved somewhere or put somewhere or filed somewhere, and that's that, right? So we've created a policy and that's that. How do you, and you mentioned that you also help them to create a strategy to uphold these policies, but how do you feel? Do you feel that that companies sometimes just create policies to just get it over with and don't really do something with it?
Yeah, it's definitely a risk. It all comes back to the commitment. So what we say is that we don't look at the sector per se. We don't look at the geographical location per se. We look at commitment. If there is commitment to not only have a statement, but have an action plan, which is really what actually makes a difference for the impact, then it does not stay as a document that is forgotten. And its value, if it's only a piece of paper, it's really almost zero.
Yeah.
And so when you look, because we also assess the sustainability credentials of investees, for example, for investors, if you look at a company that has just limited itself to publishing a statement on the website and there is nothing else, at least not disclosed, but there is nothing else there, then the claim of sustainability is really weak. So it's not only having a commitment or a future forward-looking statement. It's really about having in place and disclosing the structure that sustains that commitment. And it needs to be action plan, it needs to be indicators, it needs to be a monitoring and evaluation mechanism that takes into consideration those indicators and reports on short, medium, and long-term value. So what are the data, and what has been the progress, and how have you assessed that progress? Have you taken a decision on the basis of the data? So it's a multi-part exercise, and it doesn't have to be done everything from one day to the other, but commitment will drive the authenticity of what's the output, what's out there, and what's the outcome, what's the actual impact.
Who is your typical client?
So we've had SMEs in agriculturals because it's a sector that brings up many labor, especially labor-related social risks. We've had financial advisory firms for what I was saying before, for independent assessment reports and investees and help with the engagement with those. We have had startups that I was saying want to make everything look good before starting their business. And it really changes also in terms of sector. But I have to say there has been engagement from bigger corporations, but mainly smaller and medium enterprises are those that are looking into this my personal opinion is that in this case, it is easier because you need to start with the right foot, and it's less costly than having to revise everything that has been done. But for us, it's also easier in a way because it's more agile, and you manage to reach a final, let's say, decision and to get to the bottom of things quicker than with bigger corporations.
And you are woman-owned, and you mentioned you have a partner. So there's the two of you own the company. You both are founders. Your team consists, like I think, 3 people, the full team. But then you have like all colleagues that work like independently, if I understood it right. Like
yes, exactly. We have a small core team, so it's the 3 of us. But we operate as a conglomerate. So we bring in our associate experts and our partner firms when there are multi-part projects that require different expertise. Because our mantra is know what you know and be honest about what you don't know. Sustainability is a very complex world, and we know where our expertise lays, and we value the expertise of partners for a complete offering. So to offer other dimensions of the analysis, of the monitoring and evaluation, and the guidance in general. And especially we have a main partner that is an environmental consultancy firm with whom we work very often. And we bring in experts from the financial world for sustainable finance, for due diligence on anti-corruption. So we have a gender diversity and racial equity expert, investor relations experts. As you will see, there's quite a wide network, and we like this system because on one hand it values expertise, so it gives the ability of having an agile structure because we are a small consultancy firm, but at the same time to have a really specialized knowledge of different parts and different experts.
you have started your business in 2019. Was it 2020?
2020.
2020. So you're just starting. Do you feel that you need to grow?
I think we would like to grow, maintaining this structure in mind. We really like the fact that we operate as a collective of knowledge leaders, we like to call it. We like the fact that we can operate collectively and have a global reach, but at the same time maintain a small centralized control or management of the network. So definitely we need to grow. We are a young consultancy firm, so we welcome any new partnership. We like to meet people that are like-minded as yourself, and we like to continue to grow our network. Absolutely. And who knows? We were born during the pandemic, so we don't have a physical office yet. We have the headquarters in Geneva, but we are traveling around Spain and then London and then Italy. But in the future, why not? If need be, we will think about expanding too.
The abbreviation BST, what does it stand for? I don't remember looking it up, but probably I can find it on the website, but I didn't see it so quickly.
So it stands, we like the fact that it resembles the best impact. So that was one of the reasons. But we actually started this project being 3 founding partners. So that is the initial of our 3 surnames. And one of these partners had to go back to the United Nations where she worked previously. And so now is Julia and I, and then John, who works in our team from London, although he's not a partner yet.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's some growth possibilities there.
Absolutely.
You are also still a associate consultant at EsiMonitor.
Yes, so that's the environmental consultancy that I was mentioning to you before. They are consultants with us, and we are consultants with them because we work in close partnership.
Right. But that also means that they hire you for some jobs where they need your knowledge.
So they have a platform for footprinting where we are collaborating and including so we generally collaborate on let's say the cross-fertilization of the two dimensions. So be it from a policy point of view or from an indicators point of view. And it's very interesting when you look at how you can guide a business to measure the performance and the impact, not only from for their emissions and their carbon footprinting exercise, but also for the impact on socially relevant issues. So we work on the development of KPIs that are relevant for human rights enjoyment, for labor, for governance, and we are looking into strengthening this partnership further.
I've noticed that it is an important thing, and at the same time, it looks complicated for entrepreneurs to make the impact measurable, right? So to make it visible, and you can not control, but at least steer your impact when you have the right numbers, the right measurements. What do you think is a good way for a company to start measuring their impact, to make it visible, to make it so that they can be accountable to it?
So I think that in this, you really have to start from the benchmark that already exists in the international framework. It's not something new, and it's not necessarily something that needs to be done on a very tailored basis. There is an added value of having your own indicators, the ones that work for you, but there are frameworks existing that guide that also have a social side to it. There is GRI, there is SASB. Obviously, they need to be developed farther from a human rights perspective to really reflect what are the efforts that the company is making in generating positive impact. There are small steps that can be done that really, for example, look at disaggregating data. So talking about gender diversity, not only looking at how many female employees do you have, but disaggregating them for contract type and for seniority, and disaggregating also pay data. So on one hand, these are the type of indicators that can help keep track on the current performance. And it's important also to make decisions based on those data, not only to limit yourself at disclosing them. If you look at governance, for example, if you have a code of conduct and you have in place a mechanism that verifies compliance with the code of conduct, then a good indicator can be keeping track of the complaints and trying to disaggregate this data per type of violation. Numbers of times that a violation has been verified, type of action that has been taken after a violation has been verified. So it is a disciplinary measure only, or did you provide remedy? What type of remedy has been provided? Has been compensation? Has been restitution? So you can always go a little bit deeper to try and have a more a truthful picture of what's actually happening, that it can be different from your good intentions, because there can be an amazingly articulated grievance mechanism for employees, But if you don't keep track of how many complaints you have received, you don't see that one person has used it only. Or if you see that one number, you may think that that's a good sign because everything goes well, and you don't realize that actually there is not enough guarantees of confidentiality, and you're not guaranteeing the anonymity of the complainant. And so you don't look at what are potential actions that you can take, that this data inform you.
I think this is, we're getting to the final questions here, because 2 episodes ago I talked to Seren Denise, and she's from We Are Basics, which is a clothing company, and they make like basic clothes for people so that you don't have to buy the latest fashion, and they want to eradicate fast fashion, or at least reduce. And what you see in the fashion world, but I also see it in agriculture, is that the subcontracting, right? So a big brand subcontracts the production of their clothes to all these smaller factories, and they subcontract and they subcontract. So what you see, if you look at, for example, Deutsche Welle, which is like a documentary channel on YouTube, they have these documentaries about fast fashion where these companies like Zara, you look into their shops, not their shops, but clothing shops in the UK actually, right, where people they don't have a contract, they have to work like for a couple of months for free, and when there's no work they have to go home, they don't get paid. So even in like the Western world, there is these areas where people can still be abused because of the unclear constructions, and it looks like we can not even hold these larger corporations that make billions of dollars a year in profit accountable for these situations. What do you think that we need to do there? What do you think that how your work, not just your company, but the type of work that you do, can help reduce these kind of situations?
I think due diligence, and specifically human rights due diligence, plays a key role in this. And thankfully, and I always look at the law for what I told you, the law makes it easier for companies to open their eyes and think that they need to do this, because otherwise they won't be compliant with the law, and there are fines and there are consequences. So it reduces all the advocacy part that we were talking about before. And thankfully, on the due diligence, specifically on human rights due diligence, there have been various legal developments that help creating the structure for companies to pay attention to these issues and to really act upon and have processes in place to identify these risks, to prevent them, to mitigate them when they happen, and to avoid the risk of having irreparable harm. So something that you cannot restitute back to the victims. And we've seen this in the last year in Germany. There has been the Due Diligence Act that looks also at human rights risks. Recently, a bill has passed in the Senate of the US looking specifically at forced labor risks in the supply chain, and the European Union as well. So we're looking at the Western context. European Union as well, the Commission has adopted the directive on corporate due diligence. And the interesting thing is that it does not only look at EU operating companies, it looks at all EU-based companies, it looks at all EU operating companies. So even adverse impact that has happened outside the territory of the Union, and it looks at the whole value chain, upstream and downstream. So these are all objective elements that push for a change in behavior. And for what we're seeing, the direction is that, and corporations will have to be forced to implement processes to really go beyond their own operations and look at the whole supply chain, because that's obviously where most risks appear, and considering not only the risks to human rights but also the risks to the whole enterprise when these scandals come out, and it's increasingly easy that there is a collective immediate awareness especially with the social media platforms that allow any journalist to go and visit a subsidiary or a supplier that is in a different context and document exploitation or child labor. That has enormous negative repercussions on the business. So this is what we are hoping to see, that the awareness will increase and that it will trigger a change in action.
What I've learned today from this conversation is that it's still a very, for me, abstract topic. It's not an easy topic to talk about because I don't have the knowledge, and I think that is the same for like 99% of the people because they didn't study law. And at the same time, I understand that the work that you do is like a bridge between the people and the government, right? So the government protects the people from certain situations, from exploitation or abuse or whatever. And you, with your business, help companies to implement rules, regulations, strategies to make sure that they can comply on those directions from the government, how we should work or how we should reward or how we should do things. And that's, I think, is an interesting job, an interesting occupation that you've created, because for most people it's very difficult to understand what's going on and what you need to do to comply. Of course, we all look up to all these corporates that we know that do wrong, but at the same time, when you're a small business owner or medium-sized business owner, you could make the same mistakes if you are not aware of what's going on. And I think it's a very fulfilling assignment that you have. Thank you for that.
It can be. No, thank you. No, it can be, definitely. And, there is a part that is about compliance, as you were saying. For us, is really putting the individual at the center. So if it is the government that has to enact laws to protect the individual from a disproportionate power, the disproportionate power can come from authorities and can come from corporations. So it is a bridge, as you say. Sometimes aligns with obligations and aligns with compliance, and sometimes it's about being a forward-looking business that wants to give a substantial contribution to human rights and to the SDGs, and that sets a higher standard than what the laws ask. Sometimes the law, let alone the Western context, but sometimes the law can be substandard, cannot really be adequate to protect the rights of the members of the community, of the individuals. And therefore, we really look at a commitment that sets a higher standard and that looks beyond that. And that's what's going to make a business future-proof in the end.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it, but I think yes, of course you're right, because this is your work. But I can see that too. I can see the importance that you actually even go beyond the law, because the law is often behind, because it's just putting stuff down that happened already, which we now feel is not the right way anymore. I mean, at one point it was normal and in the law that we could own people, right? For example, like we could own slaves, and that's not accepted anymore. But at that time, it was the law, and that was how it was written down. And you go, like you said, you go beyond that, and you make sure that we protect the individual. I love the way
try.
That's explained. Well, that's your job. That's what you do. So that's more than trying.
Yes, sometimes it's really it goes hand in hand with what you were saying. When the legislation is not really up to international standards, and it can be because of a variety of reasons. There can be sociopolitical challenges, there can be historical reasons. Then we look at how a company can navigate these conflicting requirements, and really trying not to be in trouble on one hand, because some things may be completely prohibited by law. We'll look at the freedom of association in some contexts, but on the other hand, really have internal standards and internal measures to foster this enjoyment of rights.
Silvia, it was wonderful learning from you today. You've made it a bit clearer for me how it works and what we need. Thank you for that. And I really hope that you make it easier for a lot of companies to work on the SDGs, improve the world, and make that very transparent for the rest of us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.